welcome to Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Kaila.
Ari.
And I'm Josh. And today, for the first time in Literary Gladiators discussion history, we are holding a few discussions this season in my library. We've held individual videos, and all of my individual videos are held in here, but I felt that we should hold a general discussion in here as well, because it is the main product of our channel. Today we're going to be going over a long-anticipated work among both viewers and participants of the show, and that is 1984 by George Orwell.
Hey, Orwell.
Ari Schneider again. Report to room 101.
I'm not moving. I don't care, big brother.
Right, that's it.
No!
I'm sorry about the intrusion, folks, but I'm the one doing this.
I guess I'll have to stand back here.
I'll take.
You're getting close in.
I thought you were gonna be helping the camera at this one.
No, I'm not. So, what's going on, guys?
Already, we are going to have 5 people in this discussion, I guess, because Big Brother wants to take part. He's not sending Ari to relive his worst nightmare.
Man, I'm the worst nightmare. Anyway, 1984 is a really good book, and I remember I read it in high school, and I hope you guys enjoy our discussion of it.
Already. And Trevor, you have a discussion starter for us?
Yes, I'd recently gotten into the reading of 1984 owing to recent events in the world today. I will not go into too much detail, lest I offend some of our viewers, but suffice it to say, the whole world is going to pot, and unless we're careful, we may end up becoming just like the world of 1984, and you can call this place Airstrip 6. Or rather, Airstrip 666.
Ooh.
My apologies, couldn't resist a little snide.
So what kind of question do you think would be pertinent to talking about 1984?
Are we really living in an oligarchical collective, or is it still not too late?
First of all, you made a point about trying not to offend people. The things that I read in here, there are arguments that can be made that can very easily offend people. Whether it be toward women, toward children,
even towards regular old men.
Regular old men, even the establishment, but who gives a damn? But with the second point, I would say yes and no. I think that there are great hints to elements that can be found in not just today's, but not just this particular society, but in societies across the globe. But I don't think it's to a point where they can be deemed as extreme as those that are taking place at Airstrip 1 in Oceania.
I'm actually going to say that I feel, at least up until recently, that maybe things were going downhill, but at the time of filming this episode, we just had the issue with Charlottesville, Virginia, and what I've been seeing is a lot of anti-hate and like people condemning hate, which they didn't do several weeks ago. And I think that if we keep going on and trying to condemn hate and condemn issues, even if someone like Big Brother would be in power, as long as you condemn it, I think that we can make our own decisions in life.
I think that idea of Big Brother is very poignant right now. I think that, this novel kind of, as far as I know, originated the idea of Big Brother, but it's become a very, household phrase, really. And
sure,
I think that, aren't we all kind of afraid of Big Brother at this point? Or we all kind of suspect Big Brother?
Yeah. I remember when I read this book back in the mid-'90s for the first time, you know, it was before the internet really exploded into where everybody's walking around with their own personal recording device connected to the internet in their pockets. And there was a thing called the V chip that the government was talking about coming out with and making mandatory in all television sets, that was being pushed as a way to have restrictions on for children, so that you could set up your V chip to exclude certain channels from your TV. But it was a two-way transmitter that they were talking about putting in TV, so everybody was all paranoid about that at the time, because obviously you don't want a two-way transmitter in your TV set, and probably a large part of that is due to the telescreens and everything in 1984.
That Nielsen box thing.
You make a really good point, though, about having like portable computers in our pockets, basically, because I can't tell you how many times I've been like talking about something and I go to Google it, and it's you start typing in, you get 2 letters in, and it's the first thing that pops up on your phone.
Yep.
I hate when that happens.
It's creepy.
It is.
I even have a blue piece of tape on my webcam.
Oh, that's actually a pretty good idea.
They had this kind of some kind of chip or some kind of clip that you could put on top of it in lieu of the tape. And he went on the Shark Tank. He didn't get a deal, but after he appeared on Shark Tank, sold millions of them.
The CIA basically had ways to get into, pretty much every smartphone, into your appliances, into everything, and it was just all put out on, not the actual code. Julian Assange said that, he wanted to talk to everybody in tech to fix up their security holes and everything. So he didn't actually put out the programs, but they had leaked out of the CIA before Assange got them. So they're just out there, like all these programs, and what steps are being taken to make sure that just anybody on the black market can't find this stuff and get to it. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, with the surveillance state, so to speak, I would say that we're definitely heading in that direction. There's an opportunity there, obviously. I mean, especially since we're all willing kind of participants in carrying around that kind of technology with us everywhere we go.
Yeah.
I think as long as we...
we could be there and just not know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As long as we stay together as people, I think the Big Brother thing could be avoided.
That's exactly the point. The establishment is tearing us apart,
Right.
creating an illusion called the left and the right, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative.
That's why when I say to people, like, I'm not left, I'm not right, I just stick with whatever I feel is appropriate.
I mean, most people are middle of the road, logical human beings, and I think that the news obviously glorifies those who are extremists on either end, but most of us are normal, middle of the road type of
They
people.
glorify anybody that's going to keep them where they are.
Right.
For instance, in 2016, I'm gonna throw out I don't know. I'm just going to say it. I felt that the media wanted to promote Donald Trump because they wanted Hillary Clinton to be president so bad. And give Bernie Sanders just a legitimate competition. Give her a legitimate competition, but not to the point where he would make the impact that he did.
And
Well,
now
right.
he's president.
And now we have Trump
And
as president.
I
It
think
backfired.
I
Now
think
that
with
we've
the
called him
media-
out on that one, we can expect a visit from the Men in Black.
The thought police.
I think that the media in this country is very similar to
The
kind of
Ministry
like
of
the
Truth.
telescreens, and the Ministry of Truth idea in 1984, because they control everything we see. Basically, they control our access to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely institutionalized, things within society, like in colleges and things like that. It's like, what is that line in 1984? It's he who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. And if you look at the way history is taught, the horrors of the Nazis are taught, pounded, but like what the communists did and things like that, it's all glazed over. And the fact is that a lot of these professors are left leaning, and there has been a history of sympathy toward communism that goes back since the 30s.
Yeah.
So I think that those horrors are kind of left out. The gulags and the 100 million dead in China and the Soviet Union and all that is not. So that communism kind of seems like Well, maybe we should head more in that direction. You know, to the point where we had Bernie Sanders, almost become president of the United States.
And he identifies as a socialist and is an independent.
But there's a big difference between socialism and communism.
Not really. I mean,
Socialism's a less extreme.
Stalin was a socialist.
Stalin was a fascist, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's the same. It's two leaves on the same branch, really. It's totalitarian, authoritarian government. Look what's happening in Venezuela right now. That guy ran as a socialist, won. Now he has taken complete power.
Well, when you think about it,
That's what the inner party is. Inner party is just a party's just a name. I like the probably one of the key points was the book within a book, Emmanuel Goldstein's work, the theory and practice of oligarchy collectivism. And I shared there's a piece from page.
I mean, INGSOC is the English Socialist Party. I mean, so it's what.
I'll read a passage from 202, not 101. But it was. It goes as follows. The aims of these three groups, which are the three classes, upper, middle, and lower, are entirely irreconcilable. The aim of the high is to remain where they are. The aim of the middle is to change places with the high, and the aim of the low, when they have an aim, for it is an abiding characteristic of the low that they are too much crushed by drudgery to be more than intermittently conscious of anything outside their daily lives, is to abolish all distinctions and create a society in which all men shall be equal. I'm going to skip over a sentence. For long periods, the high seem to be securely in power, but sooner or later, there always comes a moment where they lose either their beliefs in themselves or their capacity to govern efficiently, or both. They are then overthrown by the middle. They enlist the low, who enlist the low, on their side by pretending to them that they are fighting for liberty and justice. As soon as they have reached their objective, the middle thrusts the low back into their old position of servitude, and themselves become the high. Presently, a new middle group splits off from one of the other groups, or from both of them, and the struggle begins over again. Of the three groups, only the low are never even temporarily successful in achieving their arms. That is every empire, every government, everybody. Even people start a revolution, they get everybody involved, and then the people that are elected to power,
Or take
they make the laws and pretty much...
There will always be someone or something that is going to rebel against what you think is power. Actually, there's actually a Doctor Who episode where they specifically talk about this issue. You know, let's say you rebel and you win, and you become the high power. Eventually what's going to happen is that someone lower than you is going to also rebel, and then they're going to try and take you over. And frankly, unfortunately, in a society like that, there's no such thing as winning.
They need to have enough of a pedestal as well. But once they get up there, it's like a club that takes place on the top of the roof of my library. Maybe add 10 more stories to it. And the people below, once you get to the top, instead of helping the others, you're like, screw you guys!
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the penthouse up here now.
I'll tell you
and
what.
You're gonna do as we tell you.
I want to be perfectly honest here. I remember when I went from... I don't act like this anymore, but when I was younger, when I went from my private school to my public school, I acted very much in the same way. But I was like, okay, well, I've got something better. And then I realized eventually that it isn't any better. It's just different. Mm-hmm. And nothing in society is better than anything else, most of the time.
Mm-hmm. But when you take money and power into the equation and control,
it becomes much more dangerous.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about the elements of the story themselves, where you have Winston, who is he works in the Ministry of Truth.
Winston is he's responsible for making sure that Big Brother is never wrong. So he takes all the news stories from the past where Big Brother made a prediction, got it wrong, and then rewrites the article. Or if Big Brother or the government kills somebody, then and they don't want that person to exist anymore, then he's got to go back and rewrite all the old news articles to make sure that he will have never existed. And that's where another one of the big terms that has come to popular culture, the memory hole, which is after he edits a news story, he takes the old news story and he dumps it down the memory hole, which is basically just an incinerator. Now, it doesn't really get into how all that stuff is distributed afterwards and all that kind of thing, like, you know, or how many copies of these magazines or how any of that works. I guess, you know, there must be people that are just responsible for changing out old magazines at all the libraries or, you know, wherever you get that kind of stuff in this world. But yeah, that's what his job is. It's his friend who's working on the Newspeak dictionary. But both of that stuff is interesting because, I mean, you see it happening now where for example, the New York Times, the day before the Trump's inauguration, they had an article out saying Trump that there's evidence of collusion between Trump and Russia that was gathered through wiretapping at Trump Tower. Then Trump tweeted about it a month later, and the New York Times went back and changed the headline and took the word wiretapping out of the headline. And now the only way you can find that is in hard copy. Like if you go to the library, you'll be able to actually find the January 19th article that says wiretapping in it. But before that, it's not, you know, after that on the internet, it's not there. YouTube is actually now taking conservative channels and they're working in concert with the ADL and other NGOs to find videos that don't violate their policies, but are somehow offensive, and they're going to make it so that those videos can't be shared or viewed. So they're just going to exist in this kind of limbo where they won't come up on anybody's, you know, YouTube pages, you know, for recommendeds and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but that's what they're doing now. And you know, it's that kind of policing of thought that I think Orwell is warning us about.
But yeah,
and another example, we're shooting this over the summer, but today there were rallies around the country because people are protesting Google. And Tina Fey gets on TV a couple days ago and says that they're all white supremacist rallies.
You mean her and the sheet cake?
Whoever. Yeah, I know that she was one of the people that got on and said there's a rally happening in New York City on Saturday that is a white supremacist rally.
She was on Weekend Update. She was dressed as a millennial and she was eating sheet cake while talking about politics.
Yeah, that was Thursday night, I think. It was a Saturday Night Live thing.
Yeah, it was. But basically, saying it's a white supremacist thing, you know, it's about Google, and you know a lot of the reasons that Google's been in the news lately, as far as silencing conservative voices.
That's why I'm not getting involved in political discussions on Facebook. People are taking them too seriously to the point that friendships are ending. Yeah. I also feel that politics, especially, there are moments like this where political discussion is necessary because that is what drives 1984. But there are also moments where if you mix politics with whatever mode of entertainment, which I feel constitutionally you have a right to do so, but you also put yourself in danger of alienating people.
Right. I think it begs the question, what the hell is free speech? Like you could ask every person in the world and they'd all give you a different answer. Which is where the problem kind of arises from in 1984.
But on the topic of Big Brother himself, did any of you think immediately about Stalin when they described the picture?
Honestly, no.
Honestly.
Because that's the first thing I thought, because of the enormous face, the face of a man of about 45. Stalin was about 45 years old when he came to power following Lenin's death in 1924. Heavy black mustache and ruggedly handsome features. this
I mean,
was
I'm sure it could be influenced by Stalin. I mean, Orwell was no
Pretty much.
fan of Stalin.
Orwell. This came out in 1949, and this was during the rise of the Cold War. Stalin was still in power, and there was question as to how long was Stalin. Stalin was going to be in power until he died. They probably weren't thinking that he was going to die this quickly. But the doctor's plot and his own illnesses that were driven by his constant smoking, when he died in 1953, they were thinking what would happen if... I have that idea that what if this kind of power was what dogged the Soviet Union for decades.
Absolutely.
And that it would influence, because it was only, in many dystopians, it's hundreds of years. This is only a 35-year gap between when it was written and published and
When it was predicting.
when the year that it's predicted. Yes.
Yeah, it's all very. It's all.
But
And if this book, you said this book was published in '49, so it's the rise of the Cold War and Stalin's still in power. What happened in America?
They
First,
were all
you
definitely afraid of communism.
you had the communism issue, and you had the McCarthy issue, and you had in the '60s you had hell basically when it came to this kind of stuff. So I mean, basically, this book, like, it seems that some of the fear may have been gotten from these concepts.
Oh, certainly. And luckily, we didn't see those things happen in the actual year of 1984. The Super Bowl commercial drew up some intensity, where for Apple computers, guy throws his hammer into Big Brother, creates an explosion.
Yeah, it's a classic commercial. This book, I know, saw a spike in sales not long
Recently.
after the election. Yeah, so I mean, it's
1984
Definitely,
and
back in the
Handmaid's Tale.
consciousness of the public.
Also, what were your thoughts about the characters themselves?
The characters. The one character thing that I noticed this time that I didn't notice the first time I read it was Winston. Like, every time he's thinking about just how, hopeless everything is, he belches.
It's like he's giving up.
Yeah. And I've noticed that I do that sometimes if I'm thinking about things in a way, and I'm thinking about, my God, what are the odds that I'm
I
gonna be
say
able to-
Winston is about 75% of the world, or 75% of the United States right now.
To an extent, and I think he was that probably contributed to why he was so dry and not. I wouldn't say he was a likable character, but I think he was somebody that you held sympathy for because of his situation.
Yeah.
I
And how
think
he
he's kind of
responded to it.
a good like everyman character. Like, it's very easy to kind of put yourself in his shoes because he doesn't have too much to him, I guess. Like, he's what you see is what you get, kind of.
And that may have been Orwell's strategy.
Right.
It's almost kind of like he's not the main character. Like the society that he lives in is kind of a character in its own right, and it just overshadows everything with such intensity that you can't help but root for him.
Yeah.
What did you think of Winston, Trevor?
Seemed like a bit of an everyman.
Then you have Julia, who I think, on one hand, she was strangely put together, but on the other hand, you also have that period of time where you give someone a love note the way that she did. She's just stalking. She's just walking around, and Winston. They never come into actual contact with one another until one day she trips and falls because Winston has the feeling that he was intentional, and he gives her the note. She gives him the note while he helps her out, and that's where the relationship begins.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like, the characters, it's not really about them to me. It's not really.
And And I would actually argue, I questioned whether or not she was the one that actually ratted him out, because with everything going on, you can't trust what O'Brien's saying.
Exactly.
Right.
And even her, at that time, she probably very well changed her answer because
It could have been a test.
it was forced. So, I have the feeling that she did not. As much as O'Brien said that she was the one that did him in, I feel that it was Mr. Charrington and O'Brien. It was the people. It was the idea that you can't trust anybody around you.
Who do you think was the one that did Winston in?
Well, let's see. If we're talking about who tipped them off to the thought police, it was more than likely Charrington. After all, we don't really see much of what goes on behind that little picture of St. Clemens until the fatal moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then that voice over the telescreen. Who else knows the whole rhyme between Winston, Julia, and O'Brien? Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
Yep. I would agree with both you and Trevor. I think it probably was Charrington.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean,
Yeah,
also because
too.
he's more of a. He just seemed more likely.
And O'Brien was going undercover too,
Yeah.
or he was trying.
Although even if O'Brien was undercover, I don't think it was him because of how it worked out with.
He had something because he gave him the book.
Yeah.
But Charrington was the one that probably did the initial ratting out
Yeah.
that got him arrested and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But how about the questioning and Room 101? Their motives of torture and then the ultimate punishment that's specified toward the individual.
Basically, that they get forgotten.
Mm.
Well, in a collectivist society, the individual is what needs to be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So any sense of individuality is what you're going to go after.
Mm.
So, I mean, if you can get somebody's most secret and intimate fears and find out what they are and get them to give up the thing that they love the most, then that's, that would be the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of rats is just... having rats eat you alive is just... I wish that there was a little bit more detail.
Or decency.
Mm.
But hey, in a world of 1984,
Mm.
not much you're
You're
going
not
to
going to find
Rat torture, though,
decency.
was a practice punishment. More commonly, though, they would strap the person down, put a cage on them, put the rats in the cage, and then throw hot charcoal on them so that the only way that the rats could get out
So it's
is to
kinda like-
burrow through the person.
It's kind of like the rats version of the bees. No, not the bees! And when you put the bees in the guy's head. In a way.
Nasty
The
stuff.
bees just sting, though. The rats,
Well, I mean, like,
it's disgusting.
it is because they already are dirty,
Mm.
and they already have bacteria. So
Mm.
I mean, they don't even need to be anywhere near your face, and you can get infected.
Mm. And then finally, the thought about, granted, the last part was him being released into society, but he becomes an alcoholic. It's interesting the way that the government is able to control those kind of substances.
Will it ever reach that point? No, I don't.
Mm.
I think that people have enough power over the government, at least right now, that it won't be an issue.
Right
And
now,
I think with what's going on with Trump in the office right now is people are learning from it.
Mm.
Because I'm seeing a lot more positive movement than negative movement.
I think ultimately, the one thing that people need to do more of is vote in their primaries, because
I agree.
in the general election, people seem to... There are so many people that are pretty much decisive on one particular side, and they're more so voting against their least favorite as opposed to voting for their favorite, and a third party to them is just a wasted vote.
Mm.
If you vote in your primary, you're voting for the person that you want to represent the party that you generally tend to prefer. Ready?
Alright. Were you always sitting there?
I teleported.
He was
always at war with that.
Very
Like,
Big Brother likes to play mind games. Are there any final thoughts?
Mind games.
Change starts with one person.
I think change starts with one group or one group of people.
Which starts with one. Okay.
Which can start with one person.
No,
But
I think that-
I don't think much difference is going to be made unless people agree with each other
I would say that much is true.
about it.
But you got to convince people to.
Like I was saying earlier about the cycle. Like if someone rebels or if someone doesn't like something, they're gonna make the change, and then eventually someone else is not gonna like it. It's that people just need to accept that that's part of how the circle of life works. And sometimes they're gonna be worse, like in 1984, and sometimes they're gonna be a little easier. But you gotta just stick your head through all the good and bad times because that's how. And if you want something, you go for it.
Yep, I would say that is certainly true. And yeah, that's definitely a point that I agree with. What are your thoughts about the? Let's rate it 0 to 5 stars. Half stars allowed on Goodreads, and from there you can talk about why you rate it as such based on the material at hand. And we'll start with Larry.
I'm gonna give it 4 stars out of 5. I'm not sure why I'm not giving it 5 stars, because this book really, the first time I read it, it affected me, in a way that no book had ever affected me before. Just the way that Winston ends up, just being a tool of Big Brother.
You say
The
you
way he
walk
does.
around your streets?
Yeah, I did, and for hours, just like, that's how infuriated I was by the ending. It was the first dystopian book I read. You can see its influence in all kinds of dystopian works that are written now. But yeah, I'm gonna say 4, I guess, because Orwell, even he couldn't imagine like how the capacity for technology and how strong the technology would become to where it's like we're voluntarily now walking around with the potential tools that can be used to monitor us. So I think I don't know.
Even he couldn't see that coming.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, I think that's true. Also, I think he's kind of dismissive of the poor. I don't. It's Winston, right? He goes to at that one scene where he goes to the bar and talks to that one old guy, and then makes up his mind that there's no hope for anybody in Troll based on the one experience that he has with one drunk, senile old man. It's like, that's kind of generalizing and not, maybe trying hard enough to start something among them or whatever, but yeah.
Okay.
I would agree. I think I would give it 4 stars. I mean, it's great. It's really poignant. It's really going to stick with you. It's incredibly relevant to how most of the country is feeling right now, I think. I'm only giving it 4 stars because it was a little bit too dry for me. I really had to work to get through some parts.
Trevor?
I think I'd give it a 4.5. I think we've already extolled the virtues of the book, so I'll give it the reason why I'd give it a 4.5 instead of a 5. If the only reason I would give it a 5 is if it were written in second-person narrative. That would have had more of an impact on the people, because imagine the last lines of the book written in second-person perspective. But it's all right. You won the battle against yourself. You loved Big Brother.
That would be something, because you could take Winston Smith out of the equation, and I don't think it would make too much of a difference.
Nope.
That's a really good point.
So 1984, I give probably 3.5 out of 5. I really enjoy 1984. I think it's some points were a little long, convoluted, hard to understand, but the main message gets across, and that's what's most important. I feel like some of the characters weren't necessarily needed, but because the point had already been made across from them. I feel like the big brother figure was extremely powerful and overshadowing everything, and it was really effective emotionally. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
I read this 7 years ago, and I had very similar issues where I had challenges understanding the text, but I'm giving it 4 stars, just as I did 7 years ago, because I feel that this is a very impactful work and one that will really leave you thinking. But I feel that the structure of the characters was just okay. I think that some of their interactions were a bit
Contrived.
wooden, but
Like she said, dry.
yeah, we got to be a large thesaurus here.
Yeah.
But the concepts were haunting. The
Imagery was pretty effective.
Emmanuel Goldstein's text was very. That was probably something that really drove home, because there are a lot of comparisons that are most certainly true, and I think that the means of torture and Room 101, it was quite effective, even though I wish that there was a little bit more connecting detail to the effect of Winston's punishment. Already, if you are interested in reading 1984, here is a copy of my book, the Signet Classics version. It's similar to Animal Farm collection version.
Which is also by George Orwell,
Only-
in case you didn't know that.
Only Animal Farm has a pig on it. This one has an eye. Which leads me, Big Brother is a little bit like Sauron in how the only thing you see is his eye, but it's the fact that he's always watching.
What if there was
And there's
a little,
something to represent him,
What if
too.
there was a little chip in every single one of those books that could see you?
It'd be creepy.
That reminds me. You heard about that company in Wisconsin, a tech company, where now people are volunteering to put microchips in their inside themselves,
That
so
is
they can use the vending machines.
I wouldn't
Just-
put a microchip inside myself unless it was covered in onion
What if
dip.
it malfunctioned?
I would never.
Like, seriously, what if it malfunctions?
That's just-
Oh man, I wanted to get a soda!
Anybody that watched the SpongeBob movie, where Plankton gave him
Yeah, right.
buckets as their
Bald, bald, bald!
But be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. And for now, keep reading.
And think while it's still legal.